This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Care Notes with Doug Wilber. And Doug and I have been having these conversations for a number of years, and it seems like there's always somebody who has missed just a little bit. And I think what you want to talk about today is really important, Doug, because so many of us think, well, we can take care of these things later.
Hmm.
Problem is, sometimes if you wait too late, then it's an emergency. So tell us what you're seeing when you're going out and doing assessments and some of the things that maybe we can prevent before anything major happens.
Sure. I actually want to talk about kind of an idea around the idea is that uh, like they say that someone to become a millionaire, the best time to start that is when you're young. So for everyone to be able to be a millionaire, if you when you're in your early 20s, if you set aside, a small amount of money over, a number of years, you will hit $1 million very easily because of compounding interest. If you invest even fairly conservatively as far as what you put in, you'll do that because money builds on itself. The the same thing is true with our health, in that so often it's the way we've lived our lives that will compound and either produce a healthy result, kind of the $1 million in the
Right.
pot, or a situation where you're living, sort of paycheck to paycheck and dependent on that. And the health is a little bit like that. You do need to make those right decisions, and the earlier the better in being able to get the payout. Now, that said, that they oftentimes say it's never too late. I would say it's never too late to get some payout. So, many times we'll see someone that is in their 80s and now they have COPD. And, one of the things when I do an inquiry, I'll find out that they quit smoking 30 years ago. Well, the truth is that it still probably had its effect. It still, it is, I think, linked in to what's gone on, but it might have been much earlier if they had continued smoking. And in all likelihood, it would have been much earlier if they had um, uh, continued smoking. And so maybe they got an extra 20 years by quitting when they did.
Right.
And, still there will be an effect. But, as far as, living life, there are some conditions that I see over and over popping up. And a lot of it in our culture is around the heart. Now, and I would say almost all of it, and not all, but a lot of the conditions are immune type of conditions. So heart, when someone has heart disease, it is an immune response. Frequently, or I should say, it's an inflammatory response.
Sure.
And so many of the conditions we deal with are inflammatory. Now, one of the positive things about it is so often there are things that trigger that inflammatory response. And so if you can jump in and you can take care of something, you can, in all likelihood, impact that inflammatory response. Um, so it, and you know, so for example, they've found that if someone goes on a low fat, um, vegetarian or vegan diet that are promoted like by the likes of um, uh, a doctor named Esselstyn that comes out of the Cleveland Clinic. And then there are others that have done similar work that you will have a reversal of heart disease. They've actually been able to show that heart disease goes in the opposite direction. And so, sometimes Dr. Esselstyn was given patients that they had essentially said we can't do anything about. He placed them on that type of a diet, and you ended up seeing that reversal. And so people who had very short uh, expected lifespans, their life expectancy was in the matter of months, that were living for years when they went on this type of a diet. Now, there's some issues with that. It's a hard diet to keep up, and adhere. And so there's a lot of people who say, okay, I don't really care. I'm just gonna, I'll just, I'll
I'm
just
going to
die.
join. Yeah.
Right. But, um, you know, there are others who say, you know what? I don't need to um, live to eat. I would rather eat to live.
Right.
And so, maybe I can go through some of the conditions that I oftentimes see as being, the conditions that
Sure.
create things. And, so heart disease, one way or another, which involves things like high blood pressure, um, uh, heart attacks, um, uh, congestive heart failure, AFib, the different heart rhythm issues, valve replacements, things like that, or bad valves. Those are all really, really common, and those are all things that I wouldn't say they're preventable for all of it from happening, but I think they can you can hold things off oftentimes by eating the right diet. High cholesterol is tied in there if I didn't say that. So those are all really, really common, and one oftentimes lead to another. Because AFib is oftentimes tied with another cardiovascular event, which would be strokes, and or uh, uh, diabetes is linked to all of them. So in the Western, kind of health systems, those are all really, really common. Those are all leading, the pack as far as death for individuals. And again, and one of the things that's great about that is that you can prevent a lot of it if you do the right things. And you can also um, have an impact even if it's already developed.
Right.
And that's the part is okay. Let's say I've already had something like a heart attack or something like that, and a lot of people kind of think, oh, my life is over. Well, not necessarily. And so often you can make those lifestyle changes, see it as a warning, and you can hold things off. But so often, what I do see is a heart attack will eventually create an issue where people will develop AFib, and they'll eventually develop congestive heart failure. So often, when I do a history, I'll see all of those things kind of in the mix. Um, so then, there are things that are also, responses, which is, gut issues, constipation, Um, you know, um, there's also issues with urinary tract issues, and some of those urinary tract issues are for men are related to the prostate. And again, oftentimes that's related to diet
Right.
specifically. So the Western diet, and especially the way we've done processed food, and we're highly dependent now on eating processed food, or most people are, and we're highly dependent on fast food or on restaurant food. Is it's just bad, you know.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
and I can see the path that people are often going to take when I do the history. I know, oh, this is likely to lead to this, to this, to this. And even diabetes is related to dementia. And specifically, they are now calling um, uh, dementia or Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, um, because of the fact that it kind of creates this response in the brain that seems to be very much related to insulin resistance. And so many things can be done to um, to kind of try to avoid that insulin
Sure.
resistance. So where I think we have to focus is diet, because that and exercise. And we've heard that for years and years and years. The problem is that people don't tend to act on it, and probably for two reasons. One, there's all sorts of crazy information, and the internet is filled with people who say keto or this or
Right.
that. And, in the end, you really have to look at the science and see where the science leads. And, um, and there's a lot of fads that happen with eating, and you don't want to go down that fad path
Right.
as best as you can. And so, but most people aren't able to read the studies. If you look at a scientific journal, and it's just going to be gibberish to a lot of folks unless you have a, a science background.
Sure.
So then we end up getting information, and people will go down these different paths, and then it later proves that those paths were not good paths to go. Definitely not good paths to go. So how do you get good information? And that's kind of the $1 million question. I don't
Sure.
even know that I have the answer. I try to read the studies and see where it goes, but I am fortunate enough to be able to do that. And so I've come to certain conclusions that I think are important, and I think they're right, but I'm fallible, and I could easily be reading the data wrong.
And the interesting part is traditional medicine doesn't take the time to help us navigate. So I know when my husband was first diagnosed as type 2 diabetic, first thing he said to the doctor, on top of all the medications the doctor was writing out for him, he said, "What should I eat and what shouldn't I eat?" And he was told to Google it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
he's an IT person, and he came home and he Googled it. And somebody tells you one thing and somebody tells you something else. And
Right.
when he found something, he followed it initially, but his blood levels were not, they either went way too low or too high. They never evened out. And he started figuring it out on his own. There were certain foods that may be dangerous for somebody else to eat, but were not dangerous for him to eat. He could eat
Right.
his blood. And so when he'd go to the doctor, and the doctor would say, "Well, what are you eating?" And he'd tell them about all the fruit that he's eating, which is fruit is high in sugar. Uh,
Right.
the doctor would say, "Oh no, you can't eat it." And he goes, "But look, this is what my blood study is.
Hmm.
It's good." So that's part of the problem because we don't know how to filter out that information. I also
Right.
think as we get older, we get stubborn. We're
Right.
used to that piece of cake. We want the sandwich. We want all these things that we've had all along. And I remember my father saying for the last 20 years of his life, with a very bad heart condition, I'm going to eat what I want to eat.
Right.
And he loved his salt. And he was a lucky man. He really didn't have a lot of problems up until the very end. So, where do we tell people, you know, don't live your life and enjoy what you've always had? Do this now. And wow, that's going to be a big learning curve for you.
Oh yeah, and compliance is high, or is compliance is not high. If someone doesn't make a decision that this is the right thing, and change is one of those weird things. How do you change someone? It's like the old joke. How do you change? How many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb?
Right.
One, but the light bulb has to really want to change, and that's true with folks that are dealing with diet. One of the things that I think is important is how someone feels. And I don't mean momentarily. A perfect example is let's say someone goes on a diet that emphasizes food that will bring down inflammation. And
Okay.
there's ways that you can do it. And let's say someone loses 10 pounds, but in the process, so they are eating this food, their inflammatory response is going down, and then they start feeling better. And I think part of it is focusing on, wow, you know, I like the way that I'm feeling with this. I don't like that when I bend over to grab something, I get out of breath, or, whatever it is that happens when people are carrying too much weight, or if they get up from a chair and they're all achy, because of that. Um, and that they just kind of have those aches and pains, and they start seeing success where they're not having aches and pains the way they were before. And then you can kind of say, well, maybe I like this diet. But I think it's by you have to almost and I know different people are motivated different
Sure.
ways, but I do think success brings success. So if you say, I'll try this for a month, I'll stick to it, and then you start feeling well, and you say, well, maybe I'll try it for 2 months, you know, and you try it, and you're getting even better results. And then all of a sudden you're able to walk further than you were able to do before, or other things like that. I think that those things, you know, can bring success. Now, some things motivate people differently. And if you don't want to answer this question,
Yes.
feel
Okay.
fine, because
Yeah.
I want to ask a question about your husband. But does he have one of those glucose meters
He
that?
he's used one. Okay. He's used it a couple times, but he's OCD with it, which is
Hmm,
interesting because he's not an OCD person. But for that, he's constantly checking it. And so
hmm,
he would drive himself crazy if it had reached a high peak, but he wasn't feeling that peak. He'd be like, oh my God, what do I do now?
yeah,
And so his doctors actually told him, if you're going to use it, we only want you to check it 3 times a day. Do not check it before each meal and after each meal. So he can't get that in his mind, so he's back to sticking his finger in.
Okay. So there's a guy, and maybe your husband has seen him on the internet on Facebook, and he'll eat something and then he'll check how the levels are
Yeah,
afterwards. Does he watch that guy at all?
he has seen that, and I think that's why he does that.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that guy, and I don't know him from Adam, so I mean but he's learned the type of foods that spike his sugar and that don't. And so, the funny thing about that is I could see where that would be useful, but more as to do a self-study,
Right,
which is I know if I take this food because I've watched it, if I eat blueberries and cottage cheese, my blood sugar doesn't go up. But if I eat, an orange, it's going to go through the roof.
right,
And knowing the differences between that, you might opt for the blueberries or other things um, versus doing something that you
right.
know is going to spike your sugar. I saw the guy not too long ago, and one of the things that he said, and I thought this was fascinating. He said that he noticed that at night, if he ate food, his sugars would go out of control as he slept. Um, so he learned by doing that he would stop eating at a certain time at night.
That's what my husband does. Right.
Yeah. And then because he would follow what it was over time. I don't know if your husband had that
Yeah.
ability with, and so when he looked at it, he would say, "Oh, this is interesting because it spiked and it went down or whatever." But he noticed by doing that at night, he wouldn't get that spike, and his life was much better. And by doing it, he also learned things like if he took a walk, that after eating a meal, it made a difference. So there are
Right.
certain strategies that he personally learned, and he was his own guinea pig. Like he would read something about apple cider vinegar and said, "Does this work?" And he found, lo and behold, for him it worked. If he did the apple cider vinegar, his sugars wouldn't spike in the same way. And, and so I could see an advantage to doing something like that.
Sure.
Because some people are goal oriented, um, and so if they can see the results, that may motivate them. And my point in all of this is you got to find the thing that motivates you, and allow that, and also understand that there are very few things in our lives we um, feel like we have control over. Um, and oftentimes people, um, if they realize, oh, this is one thing that I can control, um, that, by eating in a certain way, and I will get these results, then you know, I'm going to do that. So that translates into hope, which is really important in our healthcare.
Exactly.
That you're not given a diagnosis and there's no hope. And it's just, I don't have to just live with it, but I can have some control over this thing.
And what's also very important is having that support system, and you've got to find it somewhere. Okay. When my husband was first diagnosed, I cleaned out the cupboards. I knew that I was doing the grocery shopping and the cooking. So I was going to help him, but it was going to help me as well. And that worked for the first 5 years. It was
Yeah.
right about the fifth year that he realized he could have that extra piece of candy. He could have a piece of cake. And because he was introducing it to his diet, I did the same thing. I now have backed off on all that because it's not good for me. I
Yeah.
know that I end up feeling sick when I go to bed if I do that. I know that the next day I feel like I've got the flu. And I couldn't figure it all out. And I was talking to one of my doctors, and he said to me, "What have you changed?" And I told him. He said, "And is that when you started gaining weight?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Now that you've changed it, what's happening?" I said, "I'm losing weight." Now, not big amounts of weight, but I'm consistent. And so
You're going the right
body,
direction.
right. So my body doesn't want all this extra weight, but I'm also realizing that there are substitutes that I can have for those things that I think are important. So if I want an ice cream, I now know that I can have a 60-calorie, no sugar yogurt, and that satisfies me. So why
Yeah.
am I eating an ice cream sundae with all the junk on it, with 1,000 calories
Hmm.
and feeling sick? And so slowly I'm reintroducing my husband to that as well. And the last couple of days, he said to me, "We're doing something different, aren't we?" Yeah, we're eating smaller meals and we're not eating all the junk. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many drawers of candy we have in this house. And I'm so glad that they're going to go stale because neither one of us want it. So,
Yeah. That I do think, like, personally, about a year ago, I ended up going on kind of a journey where I decided I was going to change the way that I ate, and it was kind of out of, I knew that was the right thing. I wanted to lose weight, but also, I was challenged by my sister. She had done this, and it ended up being really good for them, as far as the effects that it had. And so she kept on saying, "Why don't you try it? Why don't you try it?" So finally, I just said, "Yeah, I'll go on it." And when I say diet, I don't mean it's really a lifestyle, not a diet.
right,
And so I started eating more whole foods, more natural foods, foods in their natural state.
right,
I cut out sugars in my diet. And with a few exceptions, I'll have some maple syrup occasionally. And very, very, very rarely I will eat, something like a piece of cake or whatever. But I'm talking like, if that happens once every 2 months. But here's, that's probably, about all that it would be. And so I'm not like totally denying, myself things. And I've gone to more of a plant-based diet versus, a meat-based diet.
sure,
And it was more kind of for a period of time. And the effects have been spectacular as far as for me. And but the biggest thing that I find with it is I don't miss the foods, because I don't know what it is. Because in the past I would smell something, if I was doing more something along these lines, and I would crave it. And so I don't know, but one of the things I didn't cut out in my past, in past times when I've kind of gone on more of a healthier food lifestyle, um, was sugar. And I don't know if sugar, or the simple carbohydrates, is truly the end enemy that we're fighting against. But all I know is that, you know I don't get the cravings. I just don't. I don't, miss the foods, with very, very few exceptions. And the results are so good that I don't miss. I'm not saying, "Oh, I really want to get," you fill in the blank of
right,
something
right,
that is not healthy. Um, and I've also added, and this is There's a sugar that is a rare sugar. It's called allulose,
Okay.
and it's found in things like maple syrup, and they now are mass producing it, and so it's not like aspartame or one of
Okay.
the artificial sugars. It is a, a sugar that is found in nature. But they do manufacture it so that they have to alter something to make a natural sugar to get it in large quantities.
Sure.
So that I know but like that's what I put in my coffee now and stuff like that. It's been it doesn't have the aftertaste that the artificial sugars
Right.
do, or
Exactly.
that stevia does, or something like that. And so, what sugar craving I have, I'm able to get through that or through natural sources. So, when I'm hungry now for something sweet, I'll eat an apple or a date. Like date is like a piece of candy,
Right.
but it doesn't, for whatever reason, spike blood sugars in the same way that others do, and I think, if I don't miss it and I'm enjoying the results, from this, and I've lost weight and stuff like that, what, you know, I can do this for forever,
And I think you're right. We want to see the results, but we don't want people to tell us that if you do this, you're going to feel better in a week or you're going to lose 20 pounds. Those are the programs that really like upset me and scare me because our bodies are all different. Okay.
Mhm.
And so, um, going back to that, apple cider vinegar. When it first came out, my doctor said to me, "Oh, you really need to use this. This is going to help you." And nothing. I mean, apps. And I was cutting my calories. I was exercising and taking it, and I was stable. And I remember going into his office after about 3 weeks, and I was in tears. I said, "Why am I adding this other ingredient that's not doing anything?" And at first it was my fault. Either I wasn't taking it right or you must be eating something. And I keep a food diary all the time. So I know. And he finally said to me, "Your body chemistry just can't break it down. We're going to have to
Mm.
find other things." And part of that was really, like you said, eating more natural based products rather than the meats. And I'm not a big meat eater to begin with, but if I eat even too much chicken or too much turkey,
Mhm.
it messes up my digestive system. So if you can feel the results, you're going to stick with it. But most of
Yeah,
us don't want to admit that we're feeling the results because that ice cream sundae just looks so good.
right. Well, the usually with something like that, the hardest um, part is at the beginning when your body is kind of in withdrawal. And if you can get over the hump, with that, then and you don't make everyone else so miserable because
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
you're hangry, um, you know. But once you kind of get through it, I think it goes well. But here's kind of the big point with it. Um, Inflammation is our enemy, and there are a lot of things that cause that. Um, Whatever diet someone does, it needs to pull that inflammation down. If you're able to do that, and also insulin response, um, and then the nutrients that are oftentimes come with eating a good diet and a healthy diet, that you're going to probably do much better with your health in general, and specifically with heart disease, with digestive health, with any of the inflammatory diseases like arthritis, and a thousand other things, and you should end up doing better. there was some studies that were done originally, and there were people that were got interest in this. There's a guy named McDougall who was a physician, and he had studied um, things that had happened in Hawaii. And what they found is you had people that moved to Hawaii from Asia and Japan specifically. And what would happen is the first generation would not have heart disease was almost non-existent. A lot of these folks came and they were working on
Right.
the um, pineapple farms out there.
Sure.
Anyway, they found that they didn't have heart disease, they didn't have arthritis. There were multiple things, and but the generation after that did, and so what's going on here? It's obviously not a genetic thing, because the next generation is sharing the same gene pool
Right.
essentially. Um, and what they found, it was diet. And then they said, well, what is the diet? Well, second generation largely adopted, or the first generation that was American or Americanized, was eating really the standard American diet. The generation before kept to their traditional diet, and when they looked at that traditional diet, it was plant-based. It was largely whole foods,
Yep.
as far as that, and very little meat in that diet. And so, or even, I think when they saw that, then they said, "Oh, maybe there's a link there." And so that was one of the things that started having folks look at the link with heart disease and diet, and why certain populations did better than other
Sure.
populations. So, it seems like the data is in that plant-based in heart, there's a real positive, and plant-based in arthritis, there's a real positive effect. There's now a lot of research being done. I don't know if you've seen this on the microbiome, and which is our gut bacteria.
Right. Right.
And they're finding that the gut bacteria um, plays a huge role in our health if we have the right bacteria that are growing
Right.
there. And I think theoretically, one of the things that's happening is that diet supports a different microbiome. And so, that's affecting how we're responding. I mean, that's not the only thing, but that's one of the things that is a part of that plant-based diet. The one thing I can tell you is what our bodies don't understand is processed food. And processed food, even if someone didn't do anything but cut out the processed food and went back to cooking just regular old-fashioned food, they're going to be miles ahead than, without even going the extra step of going more plant-based, because both restaurant food and processed food are awful. They're
Right.
just awful, you know. And do you know how many people are living off of TV dinners?
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, they are. It's just there's a lot of older people that are living off of, we don't call them TV dinners, but that's what they are, the
Right.
modern equivalent of TV dinners.
Well, they're
So,
easy. They're microwavable,
yeah.
and we've gotten in one of the things that I do a lot of. My husband will eat more processed food than I do. Um, I don't like the taste of most processed food, so that's probably a good thing for me. But I'd rather just eat a good vegetarian salad and get
Hmm.
my fill out of that, and I can be full. Now, my husband can't. He looks
Yeah.
at it and he doesn't like all the vegetables. Yeah, he likes the cucumbers and the lettuce, but that gets boring. I'll add I'll add beans to mine. I'll add things that are good for me. But it takes changing your mindset. It really does. Beans are my meat now. And
Yeah.
I don't miss not having a steak. If he wants a steak, he can have it. I'll cook it for him, but I don't want it. So
Yeah, it's weird because I have always hated salads. I mean, I'll eat a salad, but um it definitely did not register on my scale. Like I never thought, oh, I want a big bowl of
yeah,
salad. And the first month that I adopted this, I started eating a lot of salad with a lot of things added,
yep,
some nuts, some, garbanzo beans, different things like that, a lot of chewy things. And, I felt like a horse, just
yep,
chewing, chewing, chewing. And it was like it took a long time to get through it because all I felt like I was doing, I was chewing, but I noticed something. I would eat that and I wouldn't be hungry afterwards.
right,
Like it actually did satisfy me, and I thought, well, I guess if I can eat that and do it, and maybe it was, you know, more work than I'm used to because I've because of having to use my jaw a lot.
but the key
Uh,
to it is what you said are the things that you're adding to it are nutritional components.
yeah,
Okay. It's not just filler. And the things that allow you to chew or crunch, it takes away from those French fries and the other things that we're used to, feeling crunchy or have a certain taste. So I never thought that I would get excited about, putting radishes in a salad. As a kid, I hated them. Now it's crunchy. I don't
yeah.
even think about the taste. It's something that I can crunch.
Well, one thing I noticed too is funny because when I did this, I started actually liking. Now, I've always had a high tolerance for hot, so I could eat hot food. But I actually started eating more, being able to eat more hot food than before and liking it. Like it was like my palate changed. So I don't know, and it's not so much that everyone's palate's going to change to
Sure.
hot food, but there was something that changed by doing that, that caused my taste buds, my whatever centers those are, that says this is something I like or enjoy, was changed in the process. But the one thing I found is that I needed to give it time, and it was, kind of month of starting every dinner with a salad. I like a big salad.
Yeah,
And then if I was hungry for anything after that, I, would eat, but it was starting with that. And man, it changed something, it reset something. And I think that's a part of it, is that you just have to have the resolve
right.
that I'm going to, change this part of my life, because I don't want, I see enough that I don't want that to be what I experience if I can change it.
Exactly.
If I can't change it, that's what it is. But this is one of those things where I can change it. And then the outcomes, why wouldn't I? I because I there's two ways you can enter your your older years. You can enter it, and just kind of limp through, or you can do well. And so ideally, they say that, a really successful life is you're healthy, 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 and then you have a rapid decline, and it's a short period rather than what so many Americans experience, which is a an extended period of
Right.
chronic conditions over time, and that is the part I think we can control. And I also think we probably can control, how long, in general, that we can buy a couple extra years,
Sounds wonderful.
but it's the healthy years that are more important.
Exactly. Exactly.
So anyway, well, I enjoyed our talk, and I hopefully your husband's okay with you showing me.
Oh, oh, I talk about my
If not,
husband and
just
my son
delete
all
this
the
thing.
time.
You can just
They're
cut
used to
it out.
it. Hey,
I don't know what happened to that podcast.
yeah. That's the one thing when you're married to somebody who is a podcaster and a coach, you have to know that some of your secrets are going to get out there because it's all about living life to our best. And he's getting better. So that's important.
All right.
Great day.
Take care. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.